At his son's luxurious housewarming party, an elderly father noticed his wife's hands trembling as she whispered, "We have to leave. Right now." But when an old painting triggered memories from 34 years ago, a buried family mystery, a missing fortune, and a dangerous secret began to unravel. Stay until the end, because the truth behind that whisper would change their family forever. Don't forget to subscribe to Calm Dad Stories for more emotional mysteries and unforgettable family secrets. I am Selim Vermont, 63 years old, retired, and perhaps too accustomed to quiet routines. Most mornings, I water the orchids in my greenhouse, read old newspapers, and listen to soft jazz while my wife, Seraphine, prepares tea exactly the way she has for nearly 30 years. That morning seemed no different. Sunlight filtered through our dining room windows as Seraphine adjusted the collar of my beige jacket. "You still refuse to buy a new suit," she said with a faint smile. "I've survived 63 years with this one." She shook her head, amused. Today was important. Our son, Orion Vermont, had invited us to his new housewarming party. Even now, I still found it difficult to believe how successful he had become. He had started with almost nothing after university, worked endless hours, and somehow built a thriving investment company before turning 40. 3 months earlier, he had called us with excitement in his voice. "Dad, Mom, I bought a house." I had expected a comfortable suburban home. Instead, he sent photographs of an enormous hillside mansion overlooking the city. I remembered staring at the pictures for several minutes. "Is this a hotel?" I had asked. Orion laughed. "No, it's mine." Now, as our car climbed the winding road toward the estate, I finally saw the place with my own eyes. The mansion was even larger than the photographs suggested. Tall stone walls surrounded carefully maintained gardens. Decorative lanterns lined the pathway. Expensive vehicles filled the circular driveway. I slowly stepped out of the car. For several seconds, I simply stared. Seraphine stood beside me. He really did well for himself. I nodded quietly. "Yes." He did. The front doors suddenly opened. "Dad." Orion hurried down the stairs with the same energetic smile he had worn since childhood. He embraced me firmly. "You're late." "We're only 10 minutes late." "That's late." He hugged Seraphine next. For a brief moment, I forgot my age and simply enjoyed being a father. Inside, the house looked almost unreal. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand hall. Marble floors reflected the warm lights overhead. Soft piano music floated through the air, while elegantly dressed guests mingled near long tables covered with expensive food. I suddenly felt underdressed. Orion noticed immediately. "Relax, Dad. Half these people are pretending to be important." I laughed. Some things about him had not changed. As we walked through the hall, I noticed paintings, antique furniture, and shelves filled with rare books. The entire place felt carefully designed. Too carefully. I could not explain why, but the mansion gave me an odd feeling. Perhaps it was simply because I had spent most of my life in modest homes. Or perhaps it was something else. "Mr. Vermont." A smooth voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned. A distinguished man with silver hair approached us. He appeared to be in his 60s, wearing a dark tailored suit and a polite smile. "This is Dorian Vailcrest," Orion said. "My business partner." The man extended his hand. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you." I shook his hand. His grip was firm. "Likewise." He smiled warmly. "Your son speaks highly of you. Only when he wants something." Everyone laughed. At first glance, Dorian seemed perfectly charming. Yet there was something unusual about him. Perhaps it was the way he observed people. His eyes seemed to notice everything. Before I could think further, several guests called for Orion's attention. "I'll be back in a minute," my son said. He disappeared into the crowd. Dorian excused himself shortly afterward. Seraphine and I wandered toward the main sitting room. A large fireplace dominated the far wall. Above it hung an enormous oil painting. I stopped. The artwork depicted an old countryside estate surrounded by fog and tall cedar trees. It was beautifully painted, yet strangely unsettling. I glanced toward my wife. She had become completely motionless. Her expression changed. All color slowly drained from her face. Seraphine. She did not answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the painting. Are you all right? Still nothing. Then I noticed her hands. They were trembling. A cold feeling settled in my chest. My wife was not easily frightened. In nearly 30 years of marriage, I had seen her remain calm during financial troubles, medical emergencies, and even natural disasters. But now she looked terrified. She suddenly grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were ice cold. Selim. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I leaned closer. What is it? She swallowed nervously. For several long seconds, she said nothing. The piano music continued. Guests laughed nearby. No one seemed to notice us. Then she looked directly into my eyes. We need to leave. I frowned. Leave. Right now. I stared at her in confusion. Why? She looked back at the painting. For the first time in decades, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. And then she whispered something that made my heartbeat slow. You didn't recognize it, did you? For several seconds, I simply stared at my wife. The sounds of the party suddenly felt distant. You didn't recognize it, did you? I looked back at the painting above the fireplace. It showed an old estate standing under a gray sky. A stone fountain occupied the center of the garden, and tall cedar trees surrounded the property. No, I said quietly. Should I? Seraphine's grip tightened around my wrist. We have to leave immediately. Seraphine, you're frightening me. She shook her head. Please, Selim. Not here. I had known my wife long enough to understand when she truly meant something. This was one of those moments. Without another question, I nodded. I searched for Orion among the guests. He was speaking with several investors near the dining hall. When he noticed us approaching, he smiled. Already leaving? The evening has barely started. Seraphine forced a smile. I'm not feeling very well. Instant concern appeared on his face. Mom, are you sick? It's nothing serious. Should I call a doctor? No. Her answer came too quickly. I glanced at her. Even Orion looked confused. I think she simply needs some rest, I said. Our son hesitated. I can drive you home. There is no need. He still seemed unconvinced. Before he could ask another question, Dorian Veilcrest suddenly appeared beside him. Everything all right? Mom isn't feeling well, Orion explained. Dorian looked toward Seraphine. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Something strange happened. His expression changed. Only for a second. But I noticed. A flicker of recognition. Then it disappeared. I hope it is nothing serious, he said politely. Seraphine lowered her gaze. Thank you. The atmosphere suddenly felt uncomfortable. I could not understand why. After saying our goodbyes, we walked toward the entrance. As I opened the front door, I looked back one last time. Dorian was still watching us. His face remained calm, but his eyes seemed troubled. Outside, the evening air was cool. Dark clouds had gathered overhead. By the time we reached the car, light rain had begun to fall. Neither of us spoke. I started the engine. The mansion slowly disappeared behind us. 5 minutes passed. 10. The silence became unbearable. Finally, I pulled the car onto the side of the road. Streetlights reflected against the wet pavement. I turned toward my wife. Now tell me what is happening. Seraphine remained silent. She stared through the windshield. I have never seen you react like this. Still nothing. Did someone threaten you? No. Do you know Dorian? Her eyes widened slightly. I immediately noticed. You do. She slowly closed her eyes. I wish I didn't. A cold sensation moved through my chest. Rain tapped softly against the windows. At last she spoke. 34 years ago, before I met you, I worked at a legal office in Northbridge. I listened carefully. We handled inheritance disputes and property cases. She paused. One day a wealthy family came to our office. The Veilcrests. She nodded. Their family was tearing itself apart over money. I frowned. What happened? No one knows. Her voice became quieter. Several weeks later, the entire family disappeared. I stared at her. Disappeared? Almost all of them. The rain intensified. I suddenly felt uneasy. The police suspected fraud, murder, and embezzlement. Newspapers covered the story for months. Then why haven't I heard about it? Because it happened in another state, and eventually the case was forgotten. She opened her purse with trembling hands. After searching for several moments, she removed an old photograph. The edges had yellowed with age. I kept this all these years. I accepted it carefully. The picture showed several people standing in front of a countryside estate. I immediately recognized the building. It was the same estate from the painting. Then I looked at the people. My heart skipped. One of them looked exactly like Dorian Vailcrest. The same face, the same eyes, the same silver hair. I slowly lowered the photograph. This picture is old. 34 years. I looked at her. That can't be possible. I know. He would have been much younger. He should have. Silence filled the car. I looked again at the photograph. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. It was him, or someone identical to him. Maybe it's his father. Seraphine slowly shook her head.
No.
An uncle?
No.
Then what are you saying? She inhaled deeply. When I worked on the case, I met one member of the family. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Who? Her answer came softly. Dorian Vailcrest. I stared at her. You're certain? I never forget faces. I suddenly remembered the brief moment earlier inside the mansion. The way Dorian had looked at her. As if he recognized her. My pulse quickened. Did he recognize you tonight? Yes. Then why didn't he say anything? I don't know. Thunder echoed in the distance. Seraphine's hands began trembling again. I gently held them. They said Dorian died years ago. I frowned. What do you mean? The newspapers reported that he vanished shortly after the family disappeared. She looked directly into my eyes. He was presumed dead. A chill spread through my body. The rain outside had become heavy now. For the first time that evening, I began feeling that something was terribly wrong. I looked once more at the old photograph, the estate, the faces, the man who should have aged. Nothing made sense. Then I noticed something else. Near the corner of the picture stood a young boy. His face was partially hidden, but around his neck hung a silver pendant. I suddenly froze. I had seen that pendant before, very recently, in Orion's new house, displayed inside a glass cabinet near the staircase. Slowly, I raised my eyes toward Seraphine. Why would our son own something connected to this family? Her face became completely pale. Neither of us spoke. Then my phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed only one name. Orion. I answered immediately. Son. For several seconds, there was only static. Then I heard his voice. Dad. He sounded frightened. Very frightened. Orion? What's wrong? His breathing was uneven. Then he whispered something that made my blood run cold. Dad, someone here keeps asking questions about Mom. The lines suddenly went dead. Dad, someone here keeps asking questions about Mom. The call ended. For several seconds, I remained frozen. Selim? I looked toward Seraphine. That was Orion. Her face tightened. What happened? He sounded frightened. Without another word, I restarted the engine. Where are we going? Back to the mansion. Her eyes widened. You can't be serious. Our son needs us. The rain continued pouring as I drove back up the hillside road. Neither of us spoke. My mind was racing. Who was asking about Seraphine? Why would anyone care about something that happened over 30 years ago? And why did Dorian Vailcrest seem to recognize her? 20 minutes later, the mansion came into view once again. The party was still going. Music drifted from the open windows. Luxury cars still lined the driveway. Everything looked perfectly normal. Yet I could not shake the feeling that something had changed. As soon as we entered the house, I searched for Orion. I found him near the staircase. He looked relieved when he saw us. Dad. What happened? He glanced around nervously. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? He lowered his voice. After you left, one of the guests approached me. Who? I've never met him before. I frowned. He kept asking questions. What kind of questions? Orion swallowed. He wanted to know whether Mom had worked in Northbridge decades ago. Beside me, Seraphine became completely still. Then he asked whether she had ever met someone named Dorian Veilcrest. A heavy silence followed. I stared at my son. Where is this man? I don't know. He disappeared. Can you describe him? Orion nodded slowly. He was probably in his late 60s. Tall. Gray beard. Walking cane. Seraphine suddenly inhaled sharply. I looked at her. What is it? She looked terrified. No. What? No, it can't be. Seraphine. She slowly shook her head. I remember someone. A cold sensation spread through me. Who? Her voice barely emerged. Lucran. Who is Lucran? She looked at me. Dorian's younger brother. The name meant nothing to me, but judging from her expression, it clearly meant something to her. What about him? He was involved in the inheritance dispute. Was he dangerous? She remained silent. That silence itself was enough. At that moment, Dorian approached us. His calm expression disappeared the instant he saw Seraphine. I thought you had gone home. His voice sounded unusually tense. We came back, I replied. He looked directly at my wife. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Dorian quietly said, I never expected to see you again. Orion looked confused. You know each other? Seraphine slowly nodded. Long ago. Dorian sighed deeply. 34 years. I stepped forward. Perhaps someone should explain what is happening. Dorian looked around. There are too many people here. Then let's talk somewhere private. He hesitated. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely worried. Finally, he nodded. This way. He led us toward the western wing of the mansion. The music gradually faded behind us. This part of the house was quieter. Older. The decorations here seemed different from the rest of the mansion. Portraits lined the hallway. Antique clocks ticked softly. The atmosphere felt strangely heavy. We entered a private study. The room contained shelves filled with old books and documents. Rain tapped against the large windows. Dorian closed the door. Then he looked directly at Seraphine. You recognize the painting? Yes. I suspected you would. I folded my arms. Enough mysteries. Dorian nodded slowly. You deserve answers. He walked toward the fireplace. The estate in that painting belonged to my family. I said nothing. The Veilcrest estate. I know that much already. He looked surprised. Seraphine told you? Part of it. Dorian lowered his gaze. Then you know my family disappeared. According to her, yes. A bitter smile appeared on his face. They didn't disappear. The room suddenly felt colder. What do you mean? Dorian looked toward the flames. They were destroyed. Silence followed. Destroyed by whom? He slowly raised his eyes. My brother. Seraphine closed her eyes. I stared at him. Lucran. Yes. For several moments, only the rain could be heard. Dorian walked toward one of the shelves. He removed an old leather folder. I've spent more than 30 years trying to prove it. He placed the folder on the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, financial records, and handwritten notes. I looked through them carefully. Many articles carried the same headline. Veilcrest heirs vanish. Missing fortune remains unrecovered. Family tragedy unsolved. I slowly looked up. You've been investigating your own family all this time? Yes. But everyone believes you're dead. That was intentional. Orion blinked. What? Dorian exhaled heavily. My brother wanted the family fortune. He paused. When I realized what he was planning, I disappeared. You faked your death? To survive. The room became silent once more. Then I remembered something. The man asking about Seraphine. Dorian's expression suddenly changed. Describe him. Orion repeated the description. Gray beard. Walking cane. Tall. As he spoke, all color disappeared from Dorian's face. No. What? He is here. Who? Dorian looked directly at me. Lucran. At that exact moment, a loud sound echoed somewhere inside the mansion. Everyone turned. Another sound followed. A heavy metallic noise. Then suddenly, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Orion cursed softly. What happened? No one answered. A few seconds later, distant voices could be heard from the main hall. Guests were shouting. Some sounded frightened. Then another sound emerged. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching the study. One step. Then another. Then another. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. Nobody moved. I could hear Seraphine's breathing beside me. Then the doorknob slowly turned. Click. The door began opening by itself, and a familiar voice emerged from the darkness. I was wondering how long it would take before old ghosts finally recognized one another. The voice was calm. Too calm. A flashlight suddenly illuminated the doorway. An elderly man stood there. Tall. Gray beard. Expensive black coat. A silver-headed cane in his right hand. The same description Orion had given us. Seraphine immediately stepped backward. Her face turned pale. Luce ran. The man's lips slowly curved into a smile. It has been a very long time, Mrs. Vermont. Dorian's expression hardened. You should not have come here. Lucran entered the study and closed the door behind him. Outside, guests continued shouting as the power remained out. The entire mansion felt strangely isolated. Lucran looked around the room. Then he laughed softly. Still collecting your little evidence, brother? Brother. Even hearing the word felt strange. The two men looked nothing alike. Dorian appeared composed and refined. Lucran looked colder, sharper, and carried an unsettling presence. Orion stood beside me. Dad, what's happening? I wish I knew. Lucran's eyes suddenly moved toward my son. So this is him. Orion frowned. What do you mean? Lucran ignored the question. Instead, he looked directly at Seraphine. You kept your secrets well. Dorian stepped forward. Leave them out of this. Oh, I tried. Believe me. His smile disappeared. But then she appeared tonight. He pointed his cane toward Seraphine, the only witness who was never supposed to return. The room became silent. I slowly turned toward my wife. Witness. Seraphine lowered her eyes. 34 years of marriage. And suddenly I realized there were parts of her life I knew absolutely nothing about. Lucran chuckled. Interesting, isn't it? After all these years, even your husband doesn't know. Stop it, Dorian said firmly. Lucran ignored him. Tell him, Seraphine. She remained silent. Tell him what you saw. Rain crashed against the windows. Finally, Seraphine spoke. Her voice trembled. I was 26. No one interrupted. The legal office sent me to the Valecrest estate to deliver inheritance documents. She swallowed. It was late evening. Her breathing became uneven. I heard shouting inside the mansion. Lucran's smile widened. I should have left. Her eyes became distant, as if she were seeing the memory again. But I entered the house. I gently held her hand. She looked at me briefly before continuing. I saw members of the Valecrest family arguing. She paused. There was something about missing money. Dorian closed his eyes. And then, tears slowly appeared in her eyes. I saw someone push Lord Valecrest down the staircase. Silence. Absolute silence. I felt my heart pounding. Seraphine looked directly at Lucran. It was you. Orion inhaled sharply. Lucran simply smiled. You always had an excellent memory. I stared at him in disbelief. You murdered your own father? Accidents happen. You monster. His expression suddenly became cold. He stood in my way. The words sent chills through me. Dorian's fists tightened. You destroyed our family. Lucran looked at him. No. His voice became harsher. You destroyed it. Dorian frowned. What? Lucran stepped closer. Father loved you. The bitterness in his voice was obvious. He trusted you. He pointed his cane at Dorian. You were going to inherit everything. Realization slowly appeared on Dorian's face. You were jealous. Lucran laughed. Jealous. He shook his head. I was invisible. The room remained completely silent. For years, I watched everyone praise you. His breathing became heavier. You were the perfect son. Another step forward. And I was merely the spare. Orion looked disturbed. I could understand why. This was no longer about money. This was decades of resentment. Lucran smiled again. So yes, I took what should have been mine. You killed people. I corrected an injustice. No, Dorian said quietly. You destroyed yourself. For the first time, anger appeared in Lucran's eyes. Then suddenly, he looked toward Orion. And yet all of this became possible because of him. We all froze. What do you mean? I asked. Lucran's smile returned. He really doesn't know. Dorian immediately stepped forward. Enough. But Lucran continued. Tell him. Dorian remained silent. Tell your precious family why this house exists. Nobody moved. Finally, Dorian sighed heavily. There is something else. My stomach tightened. What? He looked toward Orion. The reason I partnered with your son. Orion frowned. Yes. Dorian's expression became unexpectedly sad. It wasn't an accident. Silence. I sought him out. What? I knew who he was. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Dorian slowly reached inside his coat. He removed an old photograph. It was faded with age. In the picture stood a younger Seraphine, and beside her, a baby. I felt my breathing stop. Dorian looked directly at my wife. I recognized him immediately. Seraphine looked confused. Recognized him? Dorian nodded. Because that child was once connected to my family. The room seemed to spin. Orion stared at the photograph. What child? Dorian slowly lowered the picture. You. No one spoke. Even the rain outside seemed distant. What are you saying? Dorian inhaled deeply. 34 years ago, during the chaos after my family's collapse, an infant disappeared. I looked toward Seraphine. Her face had become completely white. You once cared for that child temporarily, while legal custody was being arranged. She looked as if she could barely breathe. No. You later believed the child had been transferred elsewhere. Tears filled her eyes. No. Dorian nodded slowly, but records were altered. I could barely process his words. Orion looked at all of us. What child? Dorian's voice softened. You. The room fell into complete silence. Then Seraphine suddenly covered her mouth. Memories seemed to flood back into her expression. Years ago, she had once mentioned briefly helping care for an abandoned infant before we met. Only once. Never again. Her knees weakened. I quickly supported her. She looked at Orion with trembling eyes. Oh God. Orion stared at her. Mom, tears streamed down her face. You were that baby. Nobody moved. But unfortunately, all of you now know too much. Lucran raised his cane. At the same moment, lightning flashed outside the windows, illuminating his face for a brief second. For the first time, I saw something terrifying in his eyes. He was not simply an old man protecting secrets. He was desperate. And desperate people were dangerous. Dorian immediately stepped in front of us. Leave them alone. Lucran laughed softly. You still think like an older brother. Whatever happened between us has nothing to do with them. Oh, but it does. His gaze shifted toward Orion. Especially him. Orion remained frozen. Everything had happened too quickly. A mysterious family, a hidden past, and now the possibility that his life had been connected to all of it from the beginning. What do you mean? Orion asked quietly. Lucran smiled. You really don't know anything. Stop talking in riddles. Lucran slowly lowered his cane. Your company. Orion frowned. What about it? Your investments. Silence. The reason your business became so successful. I suddenly looked at Dorian. His expression changed. A terrible realization seemed to cross his face. No. Lucran nodded. Yes. He looked toward my son. You believed your rise was the result of talent and hard work. Orion's breathing became heavier. Are you saying it wasn't? Lucien chuckled. Not entirely. Dorian closed his eyes. You used him. Lucien spread his arms. I merely guided events. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Lucien walked toward the desk. His cane tapped softly against the wooden floor. 30 years ago, I transferred portions of the stolen fortune into dozens of hidden companies. He looked toward Orion. One of those companies eventually became the investment group that offered your first major opportunity. The room became silent. Orion's face turned pale. No. Yes. That's impossible. Lucien smiled again. I watched you for years. My son's hands slowly trembled. You were useful. Why? Lucien's expression darkened. Because blood matters. Nobody moved. He pointed toward Dorian. I knew my brother was searching for evidence. Then he pointed at Orion. And I knew one day he would discover the truth about the missing child. The room suddenly felt colder. So I decided to stay close. Dorian stared at him in disbelief. You built his success intentionally. Of course. Why? Lucien's smile slowly vanished. Because I wanted control. His voice became colder. If the truth ever surfaced, I intended to decide what happened next. I felt anger rising inside me. You manipulated my son's entire life. Lucien looked at me without emotion. He still became wealthy. You used him. Everyone uses someone. No. I stepped forward. Not everyone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Lucien sighed. You are an honest man, Mr. Vermont. His eyes narrowed. That is why you never understood people like us. Outside, thunder echoed once more. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard somewhere in the hallway. Everyone turned. Lucien frowned. You invited someone? Dorian shook his head. Another sound followed. Then another. More footsteps. Lucien's expression slowly changed. What is this? A calm female voice suddenly echoed from outside the study. I believe the evening is over, Mr. Veilcrest. I recognized the voice immediately. So, do I. The door opened. Standing there was an elderly woman wearing a dark raincoat. Her silver hair was damp from the storm. Mrs. Elira Thornmere. Our neighbor. Orion blinked in confusion. Dad, isn't that the woman who lives near your house? Yes. Lucien looked annoyed. And who exactly are you? Elira removed her glasses. A retired journalist. Silence. Then she smiled faintly. And someone who dislikes unfinished stories. Seraphine looked stunned. You came? Elira nodded. I promised I would. I looked at my wife. You knew. Seraphine slowly nodded. 3 weeks ago. I stared at her. You told her? I was frightened after receiving several anonymous letters. What letters? She looked down. They warned me not to attend Orion's party. Everyone became silent. Lucien's expression hardened. Elira continued speaking. When Seraphine showed me the letters, I became curious. She reached inside her coat and removed a folder. I spent the last several weeks investigating. Lucien no longer smiled. Inside the folder were copies of financial documents, photographs, and newspaper archives. I immediately recognized some of them. They matched the evidence in Dorian's collection. Elira looked directly at Lucien. You made one mistake. What mistake? You assumed everyone had forgotten. She placed several papers onto the desk. Property transfers. Another document. Offshore accounts. Another. Shell companies. Lucien's face slowly lost color. And finally, she placed one final photograph before him. It showed a younger Lucien standing beside several men. One of them wore a police uniform. I found proof that you bribed investigators decades ago. The room became completely silent. Dorian stared at the photograph. You hid everything. Lucien's breathing became heavier. No. Elira nodded. And I sent copies of every document to the authorities this morning. Nobody moved. Then, in the distance, police sirens. Faint at first, then louder. Lucien's eyes widened. No. The sirens grew closer. Panic finally appeared on his face. No. He suddenly grabbed the folder from the desk and threw it into the fireplace. Flames quickly consumed several papers. Then he turned toward the door. Dorian moved to stop him, but Lucien shoved him aside. I immediately grabbed my son. Stay back. Lucien rushed into the hallway. Everyone followed. The mansion remained dark. Only emergency lights illuminated the corridors. Outside, flashing red and blue lights appeared through the windows. Police vehicles were arriving. Lucien reached the grand terrace. Rain poured heavily. The marble floor had become slippery. Officers shouted from below. Stop. Lucien ignored them. He hurried toward the garden stairs. Then it happened. His cane slipped. For a brief moment, his body lost balance. His eyes widened. He tried to recover. The rain finally stopped shortly before dawn. Police vehicles remained outside the mansion. Officers moved back and forth through the property, carrying boxes of documents and evidence. The party had ended hours ago. Most of the guests had already left, shocked and confused by everything that had happened. I stood near the terrace, looking toward the city below. The sky was slowly becoming brighter. For some reason, I suddenly felt very tired. Not physically, but emotionally. A single evening had changed everything I thought I knew. Footsteps approached behind me. It was Orion. He looked exhausted. His suit was wet from the rain, and dark circles had formed beneath his eyes. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned against the stone railing beside me. I don't know who I am anymore. His voice was quiet. I looked at him. Why would you say that? He gave a weak smile. Tonight I learned that my company may have been built using stolen money.
He paused.
Then I discovered that my life might somehow be connected to a family I've never even heard of. He lowered his gaze. And Mom. I understood. Seraphine was still inside. She had barely spoken for the past hour. I don't even know what to say to her. I placed my hand on his shoulder. You don't need to say anything. He looked at me. How can you be so calm? I smiled faintly, because I've had more time to learn something.
What?
I looked toward the horizon. People are more complicated than we imagine. Silence followed. You are still my son. His eyes immediately became wet. Dad. I changed your diapers. A small laugh escaped him. I taught you how to ride a bicycle. He laughed again despite himself. You broke my favorite radio when you were 10. I was curious. You were destructive. This time he laughed properly. The first genuine laugh of the night. I looked directly at him. Nothing that happened tonight changes who you are. His expression slowly softened. You raised me. Yes. You and Mom. Yes. Then I suppose blood doesn't matter as much as I thought. I nodded slowly.
No.
It doesn't. For several moments we simply stood together in silence. Then another pair of footsteps approached. Seraphine. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying. Yet there was also something else. Relief. She stopped in front of Orion. For several seconds, she simply looked at him. Then she slowly raised her hand and touched his face. I am sorry. Orion immediately shook his head.
No.
I should have remembered. Mom. I should have looked harder. Tears once again filled her eyes. I never forgot that child. Her voice trembled. I only believed he had gone somewhere safe. Orion gently held her hand. You don't need to apologize. But You don't. Silence. Then he did something unexpected. He embraced her. Very tightly. Seraphine immediately broke down into tears. I quietly looked away for a moment. Some moments belong only to the people living them. Eventually, she whispered. You are my son. Orion closed his eyes. And you are my mother. No more words were necessary. A soft voice interrupted us. I suppose this means I no longer have the most complicated family story. We turned. Dorian stood near the doorway. For the first time, he looked peaceful. The anger and tension from earlier had disappeared. He walked toward us slowly. The police have everything. I nodded. What happens now? He looked toward the mansion. Lucien will finally answer for what he did. And the stolen fortune? A faint smile appeared on his face. It will be returned to the surviving relatives. He paused. And to several charitable foundations my father once supported. I nodded slowly. That felt right.
Dorian looked at Orion.
I owe you an apology. For what? For entering your life under false reasons. Orion remained silent. Dorian sighed. I originally approached you because I suspected you were connected to my family. He looked genuinely regretful. But over time, he smiled faintly. I became proud of you. Orion looked surprised. You built your company through intelligence and hard work.
He paused.
Yes, some opportunities came from money I controlled. A heavy silence followed. But your success belongs to you. For the first time that night, I saw relief appear in my son's eyes. Dorian then reached inside his coat. He removed a small silver pendant, the same one I had seen in the old photograph. I believe this belongs to your family now. He handed it to Orion. My son accepted it carefully. For several seconds, he simply stared at it. Then he looked up. What will you do now? Dorian smiled. I think I am tired. I understood that feeling. I spent 34 years chasing ghosts. He looked toward the brightening sky. I would like to spend whatever time remains living quietly. Nobody argued. Some battles eventually need to end. Several months passed. Winter arrived. The newspapers called it one of the biggest inheritance scandals in recent history. Lucran Veilcrest was formally charged with multiple crimes, including fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and murder. His hidden fortune was seized. The mansion itself was sold. Interestingly, Orion chose not to keep it. I don't want a house filled with painful memories. I agreed. Instead, he purchased a much smaller home only 20 minutes away from us. It was comfortable,
Warm.
and felt like a real family home. As for Seraphine, she slowly regained her peace. She no longer carried the burden of old secrets. One Sunday afternoon, several months later, our family gathered for dinner. The dining table was smaller than the one in the mansion. The chairs did not match. The food was simple. Roasted chicken,
Soup.
fresh bread. Yet somehow, everything felt perfect. Orion laughed while telling stories about work. Seraphine scolded him for skipping meals. I pretended not to notice when she secretly placed extra food on his plate. Some things never change. After dinner, I looked around the room. No lies. No hidden identities. No fear. Only family. And I realized something. A house can be enormous and still feel empty. A family can carry secrets and still remain together.